Something I love about Torchbearers is that the testimonies are so similar regardless of where the student goes. But when you enter into the different programs, when you see the different centers, they're so unique. They're so different. I mean, you're in the middle of a city in Europe. You're in the middle of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. You're in the rainforest in Costa Rica. And it's hard to even imagine that those programs could be similar in any way because the context is so different, but the heart of the ministry is so unified across all of Torchbearers that you hear these testimonies and you could plug in a student from Timberline or from Costa Rica or from, even Ravencrest. Is there any Ravencrest alumni in here? Even Ravencrest, our rivals. You could plug in a student from any Bible school, and you wouldn't even really know where they went because the transformation that happens in their life isn't about the place or the center, it's about Christ, and that's this beautiful thing that I'm so excited to be a part of. My name is Sam. Like Dan said, I'm the principal at Timberline. Not that long ago, I was flying to speak at a different center, and I was sitting next to this person on the plane. We started chatting, and they were asking me what I did. And I said I was a principal, and they looked like they'd seen a ghost. They were just like, a principal? Like, they looked at me. I mean, you can see me. They were like, where? Like, cautiously? Like, where could this person be a principal? And then I started to try to explain what Timberline was and what Torchbearers is. And then I could see that they were relieved and they were like, oh, it's not really a real school. And so, yeah, I'm the principal at Timberline. I've been the principal for 4 years. I've been on staff for 8 years. I was a student at Timberline 11 years ago. I like to say that some people, when they go into the military, they go to West Point. My best friend, when I was a kid, went to West Point, actually, is an Army Ranger, an officer in the military. When you graduate from West Point, you're an officer. But there's another way to become an officer, isn't there? You can enlist, boots on the ground, do the work, put in the time. It takes a lot longer. You can enlist and you can become an officer. And when it comes to Torchbearers, I was enlisted. I did not go to West Point. I don't have any sort of official Bible teaching education or theology degree or anything like that. I was a young man when I came to Bible school, and I was pretty young when I came back. I was 21 years old. I'm 30 now. I have 3 children. My wife, Laura, is from Winnipeg. We met at Bible school, so another stereotype. From Torchbearers, I met my wife there. I've raised my children there. It is such a big part of my life, and it's such an honor to be here and share with you guys and share this stage. I was thinking about how Peter Reed and Zane Black did this conference the last 2 years. Dan Thomas, from this famous Torchbearers lineage, people are like, oh yeah, I know your dad. All of you who know Torchbearers know his dad or his grandpa. People that are like, I didn't even know his grandpa was a part of Torchbearers, but I certainly knew who he was. And then there's me. And I'm like, man, how can I share this stage with these amazing teachers? I mean, Peter Reed and Zane and Dan have had such influence on my life, shaping me and forming me. And then I thought, how foolish to think that or say that as somebody who grew up in this ministry, knowing that the same Christ that dwells within them dwells within me. And I want you to know that I'm excited for you guys to just hear, hopefully not from me, but from the Word, from Christ, knowing that the same Spirit that rose Christ from the dead is in me, alive and active, excited to unpack His Word to you. And so it's such a pleasure to be here. It's such a pleasure to be here. I want to look at a story in the Bible from Exodus. So you guys can turn to Exodus chapter 4. And the question we're going to talk about that God asks, you'll see on this first slide, the question that God asks in this section is, who has made man's mouth? And this story is one of the most famous stories in the Old Testament. Made famous, by Prince of Egypt, the movie, the burning bush, Moses. My son, Floyd, my oldest son's middle name is Moses. I have a deep love for this person that we're going to read about. So this is a famous story, and you might be thinking, as many times I have thought myself, well, is there any more, gems to mine from this area? Like, I've spent quite a bit of time here, but I'm excited to spend time with you together tonight. So let's read these verses right here, Exodus chapter 4, 10 through 13. We're going to start here. Verse 10, but Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue." Then the Lord said to him, here's our question, who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. Moses responds, verse 13, but he said, "O my Lord, please send someone else." Please send someone else. I want to start by asking a question. Do you guys feel like your life would be easier if the Lord would simply break into the scene and for once just tell you what his plan was? Wouldn't that make things a lot easier? It's like we read stories about Moses, Jeremiah, Gideon, Jonah, and we're like, come on, guys. Like, I've been dreaming of something like that. He busts in, tells you what he wants you to do. If he would just come tell me, we're like, man, I need a Jesus GPS. I just turn right, turn left, go straight. Aren't we craving that sometimes? Lead me, Lord. Tell me where to go. I don't know what to do. Well, I want to dig into that question because I had a moment in my life where I could relate to Moses recently, and I could relate to what he said when he said, "Oh, my Lord, please send someone else." I can't do it. I cannot do that. I was rafting, whitewater rafting. Has anybody been whitewater rafting in here? Okay, a good amount. I was whitewater rafting, and it wasn't just ordinary whitewater rafting. I decided, or I got pressured, I guess you could say, by my friend Josh, who is an ex-rafting guide, and somebody who's like an ex-anything in action sports. It's like a dangerous start to a story. Because at some point, they were like incredibly good at it or leading people professionally. And they're like, hey, do you want to do this with me? And so already I should have known this is going to be so far beyond anything I know how to do. I've like been on a raft in North Carolina in a man-made river, not even a real river. I was like, yeah, I've been whitewater rafting. I can figure it out. So he invites me, but I realized quickly that it's not just whitewater rafting, it's a 3-day whitewater rafting trip. So it's a river trip. You're camping and you're rafting. You're packing all your gear onto the raft. And we get to the place where we're going to go onto the Colorado River, which is a pretty big river. And I'm starting to get a little nervous because I realize that there's 2 boats and there's 4 of us. And only one of us has ever been rafting like this before. And I'm like, okay, my math isn't that good. Remember, I don't have any fancy education. But there's 4 of us, and there's only one guy that knows how to raft. And there's 2 boats. And I'm talking to Josh. This is the night before. And I'm like, Josh, who's going to be captaining this boat? And he's like, you will. And I was like, okay, great. Are you going to explain to me how to kind of use the boat? Like, so if you've been rafting, when you're packing your gear on the raft, you actually have an oar frame, and so you have oars. It's a lot different than when you just have one paddle and like some guys like paddle forward, paddle backward. You have oars. It's like actually requires some amount of skill, as I learned. And so he says it's actually a lot, and if you knew my friend Josh, this wouldn't be surprising to you at all. He's like, it's actually a lot easier to learn once you're out on the water. And so he's determined to teach me once we shove off in the morning. And I'm not an ex-raft guide, so I'm like, okay, great. We pack our gear, and we're about to push off, and Josh goes first. Horrible idea. Josh goes first in his raft, and then me and my friend are there, and he says, okay, push off, guys. Well, rivers have current, if you didn't know. So he's floating down the river, and I'm on the oars. I'm already shaking at this point. My arms are like from nerves shaking. And my friend is supposed to push us out into the current, but it's the Colorado River, so it's not like a light shove. You have to really push the boat out. We can't even get the boat off the bank. So we're stuck on the bank, and my friend is floating away. By the time we get off the beach, I cannot hear Josh at all. Like, he's probably 100 feet, 200 feet down the river. He's yelling. I can hear that he's yelling, but I do not know what he's saying. And so we push out into the river, and we can't get into the current. We keep bouncing against the shore. Josh is screaming at this point and like standing on his raft and probably regretting that he let me captain his $5,000 boat with all this gear. We're bouncing off the shore in this tiny raft, and I'm freaking out at this point. And I've never like rowed as hard as I had in that moment in my whole life. My muscles were so exhausted as I tried to get the raft into the current. And if you've ever been in a strong current in the ocean, in a river, and you're pushing against that current, you know what I'm talking about. It's so powerful, and I'm trying, and I'm rowing, and when you have these boats that are set up for camping, only one person is rowing at a time. So my friend is like with me, and he has no idea what's going on, and he's freaking out. And we end up in this whirlpool, and we can't get out. And it's gonna get worse before it gets better. We end up in this whirlpool, and we can't get out. And I'm rowing, and at a certain point, my friend is like, I think you're rowing backwards. I think you're rowing the wrong way. For a long time, I had been rowing the wrong direction. So I was rowing us into the place that we didn't want to be. I did not know that. I didn't know how to use one of those rafts. I was gonna learn when I got on the water. I'm in this whirlpool, we're swirling around. There's a huge dead tree in the whirlpool. I'm like, we're gonna pop the raft. We're gonna sink all this stuff. We were like, we don't need life jackets. We were all trying to be all cool, like in front of Josh. I was like, no, I'm a good swimmer. I don't think I need to wear that. Anyways, horrible idea. Learn from this if you ever do anything dumb like this. We finally, once I learned how to row the right direction, get out of this whirlpool, and then we hit a sandbar right after that. So the current is way over there, and we're on the sandbar. We have to get out of the raft. We have to like pick it up. It's so heavy. It's got all our camping gear, and we're like on the sandbar. My whole body is like shaking. My muscles are like quivering in my entire body. My legs were like shaking, like when you go in for New Year's resolution and work out that one time of the year. Like, that's how I felt. And my body's shaking. And we get into the current, and Josh is a very good paddler, so he had kept himself, once he realized how bad of a situation it was, could row upstream and keep himself from getting too far away. So we get into the current. It's probably been about an hour. We'd probably gone about 1,000 yards. My whole body, like, I was like, if I fell in, I don't know if I'd be able to swim. Like, I might drown. We catch up to Josh. I'm so tired. He's like mad because all this thousands of dollars of gear at me, and I'm like, well, maybe you should look inwardly because this was your idea. And so, yes, he had grace and realized, okay, maybe I take some responsibility here. We get to this beach. Josh was like, I just got to go up here really quick. We get to this beach. We'd probably gone a half a mile. And Josh says to me, okay, this is where we start the rafting. So we literally had gone from the campsite to the beach where you get your permit to start the trip. And my body literally quivering, my muscles, I looked as much as a guy who like tried to look cool and wants to be tough. I was so tired, and I couldn't even say like, I can't do it, but in my heart, I was like, I can't, what I just did, I cannot do that again. We have to go like 15 more miles today to get to our next campsite, and I can't do that again. And so when Moses says, oh my Lord, please send someone else, I'm like, yeah, I get that. I understand exactly how that feels, because in that moment, I'll tell you this, when we pushed off that beach, I looked to my friend, I said, you're gonna row for a bit. Because I literally couldn't. My muscles were shaking. We're going to come back to that story later, cliffhanger. Let's go back to Exodus, and let's unpack what is happening here. So, for a little bit of context for this story in Exodus, I think it's important that we understand what led up to this conversation. At this time in Moses' life, he was actually a pretty old guy, probably around 80 years old, most people would say. And he'd had quite an interesting journey to get to that point. He'd had this, instead of rags to riches, he kind of had a riches to rags life. He grew up in Egypt. He grew up a prince of Egypt, excellent film. And he had everything, and then what happens? He kills an Egyptian, he gets scared. Next thing you know, he's in the desert, he's a shepherd, and he stumbles across something interesting. So let's go back to chapter 3. You guys can follow along with me. I want to read some verses here. Chapter 3, verse 1, now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. He's like, I'm going to check this thing out. Something interesting is going on here. There's a bush on fire and it's not burning. I'm going to just see what's going on here. Jump ahead to verse 7. The Lord speaks to Moses. Verse 7, then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians. The Lord speaks to Moses and says, I've seen the affliction of my people, and I'm going to deliver them. Powerful words. He goes on to say in verse 10, come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. I will send you. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out? His first kind of challenge to God. Why me, Lord? The Lord said in verse 12, he said, but I will be with you. And this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Verse 13, he's still nervous. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? As if like that was going to trip God up. Oh, I totally forgot. You're going to have to introduce me to them. What am I going to say, Lord? God said to Moses, I am who I am. Probably wasn't that satisfying of an answer to Moses. Okay, great. I'll try that, Lord. He said, say this to the people, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. Verse 17, listen to what the Lord says. Verse 17, and I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt. Verse 18, the Lord goes on to say, and they will listen to your voice. They will listen to your voice. If that wasn't enough, in chapter 4, we go from the promises God gives to the miracles that he displays to Moses. Chapter 4, verse 1. Then Moses answered, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice. He doesn't trust that they'll believe him. They won't believe me, Lord. Verse 2, the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. The Lord said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, put out your hand and catch it by the tail. So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. That they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. Again the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. And he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Then God said, put your hand back inside your cloak. So he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. Miracles. If they will not listen or believe you, if they will not believe you, God said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. Wow. Not only does God promise Moses that they'll listen, not only does he promise by showing these signs, these wonders. He says, if these don't work, I'll keep giving you signs. I'll keep showing you things. Verse 10, where we started. But Moses said to the Lord, oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. I'm not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue. Now, a lot of scholars will get super nerdy and look at the Hebrew of slow of speech and of tongue, and they will say, what about Moses? What do a lot of people say? Why was Moses scared to speak? A stutter. A lot of people will say, when you look at the Hebrew, you get the Hebrew out, they put it on the screen, they're like, look at this word that you don't know what it means, and then flip it upside down. Like, when you look at this, you can see that Moses had a stutter, and then everyone's like, oh, that makes so much sense. Because this whole time I was there and I was in the story and I was like, come on, Moses, you can do it. You've got this. And then you hear he has a stutter and you're like, oh, God, why did you ask him? He's got a stutter. All of a sudden, we start commiserating with Moses. We're like, well, could have asked Aaron first. You said you knew he was a good speaker. You said you knew Aaron could speak. Why'd you ask the guy with the stutter? We kind of like to find out what the excuse is. I think it's a little bit of in our flesh. Jeremiah says to the Lord, Lord, I'm too young. I don't know how to speak. And our first question isn't, why did he say he's too young? Our first question is, well, how old was he really? Well, Lord, I mean, you are outside of time and all. Maybe you busted into the scene a little bit early. It's like, he's 4 years old. He's a little bit too young. It's like we want to know how old he was. We want to know with Gideon, like, how weak was his tribe? Like, God, why did you pick this weakest tribe? Like, you couldn't have picked a better tribe? Some really cool ones out there. We like the excuse. We like to figure out what it is. It's like, oh, he had a stutter. Oh, what a relief. The reason I think we feel that way is because we really like to give excuses too. I think in our heart, we want to find the excuse because we know often in our life when the Lord is calling us to something difficult, we like to say, yeah, but what about this, God? Hey, God, I think you forgot. I'm actually really bad at that. Did you forget I had a stutter, Lord? Moses kind of tries to blame God. He's like, yeah, even since you started talking to me through the burning bush, I'm still bad at speaking. Don't you find it interesting that it was like the fourth excuse that Moses pulls that one out? First he says, they're not going to believe that you sent me. Then he says, they're not going to know what your name is. Then he says, they're not going to believe the signs. Finally, after none of those work, he gets to, his ultimate excuse that he's been saving. I can't speak. It's kind of interesting that we like to connect to the excuse so much when we often beg for that Jesus GPS, right? Tell me where to turn. Tell me where to go. Lead me, Lord. Guide my path. But Jesus isn't a GPS, is he? Turn left now. Go straight. Keep going. Accident ahead. It's like he's not a GPS. Jesus isn't a GPS. And I think that's the problem that Moses is facing. Moses is interested in God's plan, and he even thinks it's pretty decent. He doesn't say, let's do this a different way. He says, do it with someone else. I don't want to do that. And I think a lot of times we say, Lord, I want you to lead me, because we'd like to know the plan before we invest. I need to know where I'm going. Actually, I'd like to know the destination of the GPS before I get in the car, because I might not be interested in getting in that car. So the Lord is giving Moses this calling, telling him his desires, and Moses says, I can't do that. And Moses was so qualified. You guys know that? I mean, he's this incredible guy. He's in the Hall of Faith, humblest man in all the world, it says. It's kind of funny that it says that in the book that Moses wrote, but humblest man in all the world. I love Moses. Like I said, my son's middle name is Moses. He grew up in Pharaoh's house, speaking the language, knowing the traditions, and knowing the laws. So when the Lord is like, man, I wonder which one of my people would be a good choice to go to Pharaoh and speak to him on my behalf. Oh, maybe that guy that grew up in his house, speaks the language, knows the law. It actually says in Acts chapter 7 that Moses was wise in his words and his deeds. It says he was a good speaker. It says he's handsome and he's a good speaker. So did God make a bad choice? I think, firstly, I'd like to be like, Moses, just man up. Just do it. You're a great choice. God made such an awesome choice. You grew up in Pharaoh's house. Just toughen up and just do it. But actually, the more I look into it, Moses is right. Moses actually is absolutely right. He can't do it. But God doesn't ask him to do it. Let's look back at those verses that we read. Exodus 3, verse 8, I have come down to deliver them. Who's delivering the people? Moses? I have come to deliver them, Moses. Verse 10, I will send you. I'm sending you. You're not going. I'm sending you. He goes on to say, verse 12, I will be with you. Not only am I sending you, not only am I the one delivering them, I'll be with you. I am has sent me. Your God, Yahweh God, is the one sending you. Verse 15, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, has sent me to you. That's you, Moses. I'm sending you. Verse 17, I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt. I promise, Moses, that I will do this. And verse 18, the hardest one of all, they will listen to your voice. The one thing that you're the most scared of. I'm affirming in you, Moses. They will listen. Let's look back at those verses we started with. Moses hears all of that, sees all those signs, those miracles. Put yourselves in his shoes, guys. Lord, lead me, guide me. Here's your calling. And look, here's some magic tricks. Here's a snake, and here's rivers of blood, and here's a leprous hand, and now it's healed. Wow. But at the end of the day, the fear creeps in from Moses. I can't do it. I know I'm not good enough. I know I'm not eloquent enough. The fear creeps in, even though I've seen all this stuff. Moses says, let's read it one more time. Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue. Then the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now, therefore, go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. I'm going to tell you what to say. I'm going to teach you what to speak. I'm going to be with you. I'm the power source, Moses. You don't have to worry about it. But he said, oh, my Lord, please send someone else. Oh, my Lord, please send someone else. Remember where we started that rafting story? Me on shaking, my legs shaking, my arms shaking, exhausted, terrified. Please send someone else. Please, anyone but me. I can't get back in that boat. If I get in that boat, I'm going to drown. Well, I did get back in that boat because sometimes I'm not that intelligent. And we pushed off, and I realized something incredible that day and those 3 days. I realized pretty quickly, when you're in the current, you basically don't have to work at all. If you've been rafting, you know that this is true. The water does all the work for you. And when you watch a master, their goal isn't to row really, really hard and really, really fast. Oh, look how good I am at rowing. Look how hard I am at working. Look how much I can exert my energy. A master knows how to stay in the current by doing the least amount, exerting the least amount of effort. I watched my friend Josh over those next 3 days, sitting back in his chair, feet up, drinking a soda, hat down on his face, barely awake, one hand on the oar, barely steering, staying in the current. Because the power isn't in the rower, the power is in the water. And in 1,000 yards of me trying to do it myself, I exerted more energy than in 50 miles over the next 3 days. In that 2-hour period where I was trying to do it myself, I was exhausted. I was afraid. I was genuinely scared. I can't do this. I was actually 100% right, just like Moses. But what I needed to hear, what I needed to learn was, Sam, you don't have to do it. Let the current lead you. Let the current guide you. And then enjoy the journey. When you're enjoying the journey, when you're in the current, you get to look around. You get to have conversations. You get to enjoy your time. I promise you, there was no enjoyable conversations that first 2,000 feet where I was terrified the whole way. And what I want to ask you guys is, where are you at in your relationship with the Lord right now? Are you rowing as hard as you can? And are you like, I'm so tired, and my muscles are shaking, and I don't know if I can go another stretch? Or are you submitting to him and riding in that current? Because I can promise you, that current is not only where he wants you to be, it's where he designed you to exist. Moses, I'm not asking you to do something that you can't do. I'm asking you to do something that I can do through you. I'm asking you to be a part of what I'm doing. Do you want to be a part of what I'm doing? Do you want to rest in the fact that it's not up to you? You know, I wasn't actually sitting up here, Moses, and hoping and just like, oh, I hope he's a good speaker. That's my one thing. I'm not totally sure. I'm inviting you into what I'm doing, and I've promised you the outcome. And guys, I think this is a situation where we can sometimes look at a character like Moses, like Jeremiah, like Jonah, Gideon, and be like, come on, I wouldn't waste an opportunity like that. If the Lord spoke to me like that, I would be so excited to follow him. I just need that clarity. Well, he is speaking to you through his word, marvelous promises about you, about his calling for your life, all over Scripture. And so often we say, Lord, please send somebody else for that one. I'm not that interested in that. And I was thinking about this as I thought about what Dan was sharing. As I thought about that, where is your neighbor? Is there any other time where we're more prone to say, please send somebody else, than when we think about our neighbor, loving our neighbor? I'm a principal, so I deal with students fairly regularly. There are times where you would just say, Lord, it would be so much easier if somebody else would just deal with this. Lord, I like your plan. It's a good plan. Just I don't want to do it. And I actually can't do it. And I think those are the moments where we have to ask ourselves, do we believe what he says to Moses? I never asked you to. I never asked you to. Because Moses was right, and you're right. When you say I can't do it, you know what? You're 100% right. You can't. You can't do it. Just like I couldn't get into that, I couldn't row that boat. I was rowing the wrong way. I couldn't do it. But the Christian life isn't about trying and trying and trying and trying and failing. It's about recognizing that we cannot do it and then understanding that we were not created to function that way. This is a message that you guys should know. This should be a reminder. This is a classic, Torchbearers recreation. The power of the life you live does not come from you, it comes from Christ. And I'm super excited to dig into this with you guys as we go through the next few sessions. What does that look like? How do I do that? What does that even mean? I don't know what you're talking about, Sam. That sounds really cool, and I want that, but how do I go from point A to point B? How do I submit my life to him? Those are some of the things that we're going to dig into as we get into these next questions together. And so if Jesus is your GPS right now, I want that Jesus GPS. Tell me where to go. I'm going to challenge that idea, and I'm going to say, that is not his design. That is not his intention. He's not just the GPS. He's the driver. He's the passenger. He's the GPS. He's the car. He's the gas in the car. Whatever you want to say. And I think a lot of times, the reason we want to know where he's leading us is because we want to okay his plan before we decide to follow. So I just want to ask you guys, are you submitting your life to the Lord? Are you saying, Lord, not my will, your will? We're going to look at that verse in a different session. Are you asking the Lord that? Or are you saying, Lord, tell me what the plan is first. so I can decide if I want to do it or not. Because that's not how we're created to live. Let me pray. Father, we're just so grateful to be here in this place together. It's such a sweet thing to know that you dwell in this place, that you're here with us, not only with us, but that you're dwelling within us. And as we interact with each other, we get to interact with you, and we get to know you better. Lord, I just pray that as we study your word, that we would believe that it's alive and active, that we would trust that just as powerful as it is to see you speak to Moses through a burning bush, your word is just as powerful today and now in our lives. I pray we would ask ourselves if we're interested in not just being led by you, but being used by you, that our lives would be made available, and that we would trust in your plans because we know that the power comes from you, not from us. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Thanks, guys.
Sam, appreciate it. It's awesome.